from the University of Toronto.
I'm Beth Coleman.
I'm Rahul Krishnan.
This is What Now AI.
From robocalls to deepfakes, artificial intelligence is already playing a role in the 2024 election.
A bunch of malarkey.
This is not the real Joe Biden.
Misinformation affects so many aspects of our lives. In this episode, we'll focus on AI and the role that it plays in misinformation, with a particular focus on how it might affect democracy and the elections that we'll have over the next few years.
Harper is a technologist who predicts the future for a living. He served as Chief Technology Officer for the Barack Obama 2012 re-election campaign. Reid has pioneered crowdsourcing at Threadless.com, founded Modest Inc., and guided the software team at PayPal. His most recent venture was General Galactic Corporation.
And we also spoke with Peter Loewen. He's the director of the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. He's also a professor in the Department of Political Science and the associate director of the Schwartz Reisman Institute for Technology and Society. His research focuses on how politicians can make better decisions, how citizens can make better choices, and how governments can address the disruption of technology as well as harness its opportunities.
The conversation with Harper was filmed live at the Schwartz Reisman Institute Absolutely Interdisciplinary Conference. So I met with him. He was beaming in from Chicago, and we had a real-time conversation in front of an audience. Harper, what did you do making the Obama data machine? What was the strategy? What kind of data did you use? Did you use persuasive design? What kind of automation? So tell us, what did you guys do?
So back in 2011, when I joined the Obama campaign, I was largely just a tech person. And in many ways, I say that because there's this important nuance that I think we need to kind of dig into a bit, which is tech had not really participated in campaigns in the United States before. It had been very superficial, very ad hoc, but in 2011, we did what amounted to a very elaborate and deliberate tech program. And so I say that to answer your question because one of the key parts of campaigns circa 2011, 2012 was that by kind of default, based on the modeling, which we can get into, we don't do persuasion. And so our goal is entirely based on turnout. And so fundamentally, the technology we built was not about convincing someone that at that time that Mitt Romney was a bad person or a good person or whatever. The tech was more about making sure that you got to vote. And to give you an idea how this worked is we had a lot of tech that was surveillance of one kind or another, looking at voter files, calling people on the phone and then reporting back to our databases, et cetera, to just define whether someone had voted. So an example is my brother lives in Colorado. That's where I'm originally from. On election day in 2012, he received 3 knocks on the door about an hour apart. Then he went and voted, and no one knocked on his door from then on. And so from a tech standpoint, all we did was, in kind of simple terms, all we did was make tech a force multiplier for the volunteer. And so that meant people were calling, we automated the calling. People were sending messages, we automated that message sending. We did that through really elaborate machine learning driven tools for like Facebook. We did it through very brute force tools for things like SMS. We also had very simple tools that would just pop up a record and say, hey, call this person. And that was as simple as it was with a script or what have you. It's important to underscore that we did everything, like from ML to not ML to manual printed on paper to automated, really intense machine learning based flows. Like we did everything. Everything we did, from how we picked a database software to what interface we were building, really came from Barack Obama's perspective on grassroots organizing. And that was a hard bit for me to kind of wrap my head around, because I remember when they said to me, Harper, you may make a decision that is not the right tech decision, but will be the right political decision. And that was something that came up a lot. And there's also things where we were like, okay, we can make the right political decision here, but is it the right decision for the users? An example of this is we created a model, the analytics team, and then my team helped make it so it was the public could use it, that would analyze your Facebook interactions with the Facebook graph, because we had very unlimited access to the Facebook graph. And we were able to basically determine who your best friends were. And so we basically had this script that we could run, and it would be like, here's your best friend. And it was very accurate, scary accurate. And we learned a lot from our early tests, and we were just like, we have to not be creepy. One of the examples was the interface for this, the user experience for this, which thank God we had such amazing user experience people, which I think is actually one of the things that's missing from a lot of the AI work right now, is not thinking about the human interaction aspect. But we had these great human interaction people. And one of the things they said is, rather than just saying, here's your best friend, let's actually put it in a list of people and have you choose, but we'll just order it by who we think your best friend is. And so we're not saying this is your best friend. We're not bragging about our model. We're not saying how cool our ML is. We're just saying, hey, we just happen to sort it this random way, and make it easy for you to find that person. Because before it was real creepy and real bad. You don't necessarily want me to surface your ex and be like, hey, check this out.
So let's talk about the dark side of data. Social graph, Facebook, was that even legal what you did? And is this not the source of a kind of both surveillance, creepy culture? You were talking about user interface, and also just the source of how you find your targets from misinformation.
It was very legal. It was also within the terms of service of Facebook. And I think that's the really important nuance, is that Facebook then changed the terms of service in reaction to what we had done, and also Romney had done. It wasn't just us. But the real key there is that we had permission that our users gave us by interacting with us and logging in, a specific permission that was friends of friends. And so you could see the user's data, you can see the user's friends' data, and then you could see the user's friends of friends' data. That meant that we basically could replicate the social graph with 10 million people logging in a very nice way. And I think the important thing to keep in mind is we only need a graph of 110 million people to cover the entire voting population in the US. It's 110 million people roughly. And so that was pretty good. We did a pretty good job of that. And Facebook was not happy about that, because we were basically able to just copy their graph and interact with their graph. They changed that very quickly. And I think the big difference between what we did and Cambridge Analytica did is we didn't buy the data. We had the users consent to every interaction we had. We would just say, connect your Facebook account. We're going to ask for all the permissions, and we'll send you a bumper sticker that cost us a little bit of money. And then we can use that to do targeting, et cetera. And then we did the targeting via emails, text, what have you. And the targeting was very specific, where we would say, oh, you have this best friend in this battleground state. Why don't you give them a call and remind them to vote? Once again, going back to turnout. We really did unleash a little bit of what was Pandora's box here, in that the technology we used worked very well. Obama was such a public figure that everyone looked at it. I had Karl Rove tell me he read a dossier on me and my team that was, 1,000 pages long. Like it was intense, the amount of scrutiny that we had. So people looked at what we did, and then they copied it. And then they used that all over the world, primarily to do things that I personally don't agree with. We saw it in Ukraine in 2014. We saw it in 2016, obviously, and so on and so forth. And there's very few, I think, entrepreneurs, startup people, et cetera, who can easily sit back and point to things and say, hey, that's not what I intended. But we talk about unintended consequences a lot, but it's hard to actually show an example. And I think this is a good example of us inventing something because of hopes and dreams, and Barack Obama as an amazing person, and we were like, yes, let's do this. And then seeing that used against populations that are at risk or what have you is hard.
What would you say are the biggest threats to AI and democracy now?
I think the biggest threat today is not the models or AI. I think the biggest threat today is actually the people who are owning these private models. I'm not worried about AI as a technology. I'm worried about who has access to it, how are they using it, and how do we make sure that it's being used in a way that we as a society are agreeing is good, instead of having corporations making those decisions for us.
What do you recommend we do? How do we defeat cynicism and hopelessness while creating a future we want? And I'm quoting you.
Yeah, I don't know. I really have a hard time with this, because I think it's this complicated notion of the technology that's happening right now is the coolest technology of my lifetime. Like it's incredible, just incredible with a capital I. I can't underestimate how cool it is, but I also think we're totally fucked. Like I think that we're really in trouble, both because of how incredible it is, but also because this is a very large bell that we can't unring. I don't know what warning to give people, because there isn't a real easy answer. Do we choose a path towards Star Trek, or we do choose a path towards Mad Max? That's what I think about a lot. And I personally like the fashion of Mad Max more, but I don't want to die, and I'll probably be first to die. And I'm a ginger; I'll get sunburned a lot. And so, but I do like the energy independence, capitalism independence, etc. of Star Trek. And I think we just have to figure this out. Part of it is making sure people can afford the things that they need, like food, for example. And a lot of these things that the U.S. is struggling with. But part of it also is having a rational regulation about how models are governed. And I don't mean that all models should be open. I just mean that we need to have some framework that allows for a company like OpenAI to build models that are changing the world, but also do it in a way where we don't, something weird doesn't happen. And that's because I don't know what the future is. I know it's just going to be weird at this moment.
Rahul, I want to get your thoughts on this. I was reading an article in Scientific American, and there was a hypothetical scenario where an AI-driven political campaign used an advanced language model to target individuals, to customize messages to them, to persuade them to vote in a particular way. What do you think of the possibility of a scenario like that? And what do you think its implications are?
So first off, that's terrifying. And I guess if I were to think about it a little bit more, the reason why it's terrifying is if you have a democracy where only one party has access to that technology, it gives them such an advantage over the other one that it almost seems unfair. And so one of two things can happen. Either the election commission in the country in question steps up and says, nobody uses this, and the use of this technology is cause for a candidate being withdrawn from the ballot. That's one option. Or they say that if this technology is being used, it should be used in a level playing field, which is to say everyone gets access to it. And I don't know that I am qualified to be able to say which one will end up happening or will end up working better for democracy as a whole, because I don't think these things are being done in any controlled way. We're effectively sort of using these tools and rolling the dice and seeing what happens. Assuming that it will all work out okay is maybe the worst of the decisions we can make.
Hi, Peter.
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
So is there a particular new risk that AI introduces in terms of thinking about democracy?
Yeah, so there's lots. So let's take the persuasion one, right? So this will come up again and again as we talk about this, but a lot of the way we think about what's right and wrong in a campaign, in a democracy, but like in the actual practice of political campaigning and electioneering, has to do with how people interact with each other, right? So, you want, for example, when a person's interacting with a political candidate, they want to know that that's really the candidate that they're talking to, right? We wouldn't send out doppelgangers to be a candidate, right? So there's something about the authenticity of the person. We want to know that what the person is saying hopefully is rooted in fact or has been researched, and we want to know that what they're suggesting are good ideas and things, right? So there's all these things that are kind of like scale-ups of just like normal conversational norms when we're talking to anyone. And those are sort of implicitly embedded in elections. Now, you can work through each of those, right? But imagine that people get invited to, and ask me anything with a political candidate, and they're online, and people are sending in questions, and they're seeing the candidate talk about what they believe or what they're going to do. Then you find out afterwards that it was all an avatar. Well, there's something wrong there, right? And we're both uneasy with it. We're not quite sure why we are, but it kind of violates that norm that what we're hoping is happening is that people are talking to people, right? So that kind of raises the issue right now. So you say, well, what about if people knew they were talking to a chatbot in some sense, right? And it's probably a bit easier that way. We've had chatbots for a long time. People are sort of comfortable with them, right? But they may have assumptions about what's causing the chatbot to give the answers that it is, that they've been intelligently determined by political parties. So, the chatbot is just an interface. You're asking it, what is your party's position on abortion? And it's giving you the answer that the candidate wants you to give. But if in fact the interface is actually making its own inferences, then that's further removed, right, from the idea that a human has put the answers in there. So I think a lot of the unease with these things really comes from how many steps away they are from the idea that it's people talking to people within the norms of political campaigns, right? So even just this. So you think about a television commercial, right? I mean, a television commercial is a candidate recording what they're saying, what their views are, sending it out into the world. And American commercials even have these taglines, my name is, Joe Biden, and I approve this message,
That's
right? With the notion that saying this is my message, right? Well, what if instead of recording Joe Biden for a message, they tell him, Joe, we're going to do a whole bunch of President Biden, we're going to do a whole bunch of testing, and we're going to do a bunch of AI data work, and we're going to build some econometric models, think of all of our polling. And then we're going to have this AI basically record the most persuasive message of you talking, and we'll do the avatar, don't worry about it. And by the way, we'll just have the voice at the end say, I'm Joe Biden and I approve this message. Are you okay with that? And that's just production. It's not all that different than what's going on, but there's a human missing in it. I think that's a lot of these kind of source of the unease of what AI can do in democracy, just that it takes humans out of it in ways that we're not really comfortable with.
So in terms of trust, let's say I'm Joe Biden and I approve this message. That's an authentication, but very easily put that online and somebody can just remix it.
Yes.
What the content is.
Yes.
So you have layers of problems in terms of trust.
Yes.
What a campaign is producing.
Yes.
And whether they can just say, okay, don't worry, whoever, candidate, we'll take care of it. We have enough of your voice and your image that we can just manipulate this.
Let's assume everything out there is produced by the campaigns and in some way approved by them. We still don't like the fact that it might be a machine that we're talking to, or it might be a machine that's doing the thinking. But then if you layer on this dimension of not knowing, right, and deception, and not knowing if this actually is the campaign that's doing it, I mean, that's I think probably orders of magnitude worse, because what it does is it takes us from the realm of kind of feeling uneasy about something we've got to kind of work our way through into feeling like this thing is corrupted. We don't know who's saying what. I don't know who to trust here. Is anything I'm seeing real? And that seems to me qualitatively to be a much worse state of affairs for democracy. And that, think about threats of AI, right? There's kind of the stuff that makes us worried and bumps up against our norms. Okay, that's the first set. But the second part is stuff that just terrifies us because we don't know what's real anymore, right? And we don't know who to trust. If you wanted to characterize what does misinformation, look like on the internet, it's not that it's being produced by a million moles and we've got to whack them all. It's that for the most part, it's being, like most things, most information in the world, it's being produced, propagated by a very small number of people and then consumed by all of us. My concern now is that, and this may be from a position of naivete, but I think it's a real concern that we're getting into a space online where the production costs of good quality, good-looking content, even persuasive content that's been tested and proven to be persuasive, is nearing zero.
What does a solution look like? Because we're already at our kind of limit in terms of, as human beings, trying to judge, is this real? Is this phishing? What is this? So to be on alert all the time, to have to ask, second guess over and over again, it's just exhausting.
Yeah. This hasn't been a linear degradation of our democracies. I think that actually there was a point in time, which wasn't that long ago, in which actually the internet kind of got us to an almost golden age of accountability in democracies. So it used to be the case that, if you were running for office in Canada or in other countries, you could go door to door and say different things to different people, right? And candidates were notorious for speaking out of both sides of their mouths, right? Which is why we know the idiom, right? But no, you'd go to one house, you get a sense of what they want, you'd say one thing. There's no accountability. But there was a period of time not long ago when you would get caught out if you were doing that, right? Because you had very pervasive media. The internet was obviously universal, and it wasn't personalized, right? But I don't know what it's going to look like, but I could imagine that if people get the sense of how acute the problem is, then one kind of golden outcome would be that we say, okay, we want to prioritize unmediated access to what candidates are saying as much as possible. And what is that? That's candidates getting up and giving a speech each day, maybe at a rally, but giving a speech or doing a debate, which is then broadcast by all the platforms live. And you know that the candidates talk at 6 p.m. and they talk till 7 p.m. And you can see what they're doing live, right? And enough people are watching the same thing at the same time that then it becomes hard to create fakes out of it and spread it around. That would be a great outcome, actually, I think, and that would actually be a bit of a renewal of the public square. And it would be people talking to as many people at once, saying the same thing as publicly as possible to hedge against the possibility that it would be manipulated and they'd be made to say something that they don't believe. That's probably a golden age, but there's no reason to think that we'll get there. There is every possibility that the next 3 or 4 years are a massive degradation of democracy where people don't believe anything and they retreat even further into pockets of the world in which people confirm what they believe, and they'll have all those biases confirmed. That's a terrible recipe for democracy, but there's no reason to think we won't go there.
We're going to wrap it up. Peter, how are people right now in these next few months with these elections, how are they going to be able to discern truth from lies, real information from misinformation with the tools that we have at hand?
Yeah, it's very, very, very difficult, but here are 3 things that people can do practically, right? They should rely on mainstream media. And I know that sounds kind of probably old-fashioned in some sense, right? But mainstream media, whether it's television networks or newspapers, are guided by certain norms. And they do have a professional incentive and a commercial incentive to present things that are true. So that's the first thing, right? The second one is that if something seems too good to be true, it might be, and you should try to find other information about it. And confirmation bias makes that really hard. And it's so salacious, right? But if you read something that's interesting, that says something, nasty about a candidate you don't like, it might be nice to believe that it's true, but you should look into whether it is true. But the third thing is that I'll just say is that, elections aren't only a contest of parties dancing in front of one person at a time. They're all of us making a collective decision. So if you want to know whether an idea is a good idea, let's leave aside true or not for a second, but is an idea a good idea? Is a candidate good for me or not? Is a party good for me or good for the country, good for my city? You should talk to other citizens and really listen to them, right? And say, what are you thinking? Why have you come to that position? And return to the art of asking other people questions about what they're thinking and why they feel the way they do, right? And then you may find reasons. And a lot of what we're doing in elections is not making a decision. It's finding reasons for decisions that we already want to make. A lot of that can then give us a chance to feel like we're making a good decision, one we're proud of, one that's based on reasonable things. Elections aren't only fights over facts, they're fights over what we want to do together, who we want to help, what side do we want to be on in terms of where we are in society. So I think I'd encourage people to worry about what's true or not, but also ask themselves questions like, what's good for me? What's good for my neighbors? What's good for my country? And then, have conversations with people about that.
How will humans know what is real?
So I recently saw a set of AI-generated images. Now, I only know they're AI-generated now, but when I saw them, I had an immediate visceral effect on me. And it was basically Trump and Biden working together on an article. And instantly, I became quite cynical about the political process, how much gaming we really know happens in the background. But this image kind of brought it all together for me instantly. And then my thinking was, this is a deep fake. This is not real.
If AI is a stimulus, a catalyst to thinking bigger, it's also a stimulus to thinking harder about some of the problems that we're living with and that we will produce with a kind of AI acceleration.
Absolutely. And I think it is very important that people spend a lot of conscious effort in trying to think of making sure everyone is brought along for the ride and it's not left to just a select few to accelerate.
One of my favorite outcomes from our short but impactful season is seeing the rise of your fan club. So, you know, you don't have to be shy about it. It's good. Like,
I did not know I had a fan club.
Oh, I've seen your face like 6 feet tall, circulating
well,
around.
You've been right there with me.
No, I'm not always in the picture. Sometimes it's just like Rahul and the other person.
From the University of Toronto, this is What Now AI.
Listen to us wherever you get your podcasts and watch us on YouTube.